Hello and welcome to the Couch Coven. I'm your host, Teddy.
I'm Laura.
And today we are going to be covering the topic of people pleasing and learning boundaries. As recovering people pleasers ourselves, it's
hmm
a subject very close to our hearts.
hmm
Before we get into that, I don't know, do you want to tell me how you are first? Or do you want to go straight into cards?
I mean, I'm doing as well as I can be. It's suddenly a snow day here. I don't know what it's like up north. Are you getting snow?
Yes. Slushy, but it's snow.
Yeah, it's slushy, but it's still whimsical looking. So,
I love it so much.
how are you?
I am doing much better than I was last week. I feel like a human being. For the past week, I've been putting Vicks Vapor Rub on my feet and putting socks on before I go to sleep. That seems to be really helping. I'm just using every Mexican mom's trick in the book because I'm sick of being sick.
Today we are talking about boundaries and people pleasing, but as always, we are starting with a card pulling.
Mine just got spit out, so we'll go with that one. I got the Hermit.
I got the Knight of Cups. What deck are you using right now?
I think you pronounce it Fjordor Pavlov.
I believe you.
You got the Knight of Cups.
I get the Knight of Cups. I get its sort of advancement. Positive forward motion is how I am choosing to interpret this one.
Well, I like my little hermit, especially in the context of what we're talking about today, where sometimes you have to separate yourself from others and walk your own path without being afraid of being alone.
Create some forward motion.
Yes, I mean, she's got her
Yeah.
walking stick, she's walking along.
What's on the bottom of your deck?
The bottom of my deck is the Seven of Swords, which is about being shady, either self betrayal or keeping things hidden. What about you?
I got the Nine of Pentacles on the bottom of my deck,
Oh,
which I think we got last week as well.
we've been coming up with that one a lot.
It just feels like a little nod from abundance.
These cards in this reading feels soft to me.
I feel like between the two of us, we've been getting very harsh, scary readings for months now.
It's always something so dramatic, and this one is just chill, keep doing what you're doing, keep going forward.
Into people pleasing.
People pleasing is when an individual continually self sacrifices for others because of their need to be needed. People pleasers believe that if they serve those around them, those same people will value them. This is false. This type of behavior typically results in the people pleaser being valued for their use to others. This behavior is seen as their personality, often assigned labels with a positive undertone that reinforce their self sacrifice as what gives the individual importance. People pleasing is a defense mechanism rooted in anxious attachment styles, childhoods marked by a guardian or parent who withheld love and affection based on conditional behavior from their child. Fear of abandonment and rejection also drives people pleasing. It really stems and is conditioned by conditional love, where the condition is the child must perform emotional labor for their parent or guardian. Basically, you are meeting everybody else's needs. You don't get to have needs. And giving yourself away to others is what people come to expect of you. So if you need something, they don't know what to do with that. That can often lead to rejection. People don't know what to do with it when a people pleaser starts actually asserting themselves.
They really don't. I lost everyone that I thought was my friend when I stopped being a people pleaser. I was like, whoa. Parent guardian relationships, especially regarding people pleasing, is usually accompanied by codependencies. It's very common with anxious attachment styles. Also, a lack of emotional intelligence on the parent's part. The child is required to grow up very quickly and respond to the parent's needs before their own, which is what Teddy and I both directly experienced in our lives. Oftentimes, the child is convinced that they do not have needs. They're not allowed to have needs. They simply exist to serve the parent. And this behavior translates to the relationships outside of their relationship with their parent. The child has learned that they must serve others or they will not be loved or accepted. They may continue to serve others as they served their parents in that same way, entering into codependent relationships, causing their relationships to become codependent, resulting in being kept around for the purpose of others or for their use or to be rejected by their peers as a whole. Most of this is personal experience from Teddy and I with enmeshment and abandonment in our familial relationships as well as the relationships outside of that.
Learning that I had an enmeshed relationship with one of my parents really blew my mind, coupled with the abandonment issues and trauma. It cleared a lot of things up.
The pipeline from thinking your parents are your best friend to realizing that they were abusing you that entire time is crazy.
Oh my God, yeah, my best friend. We tell each other everything.
And then realizing we don't tell each other everything. I only tell them the things that won't cause them to abandon me, which is literally none of who I am.
Yeah. They tell me everything. They tell me things that I should not know, things that are not appropriate for a child parent relationship.
And then I tell them things that are lies so that they continue to love me. I realized at a young age that I wasn't allowed to have my own needs. But of course, when you don't know anything about life at all, you're not taught that there are alternatives to anything. You're growing up being like, oh, okay, I'm not allowed to have this need. My mom is allowed to have this need, and I must pay attention to her needs. She will not pay attention to mine. So whatever needs I have, I must hide and I must handle them myself. Not realizing that wasn't normal took me decades. I was probably 30 before I fully realized everything that I have been operating on in regards to my familial relationships are based on lies because I can't be who I genuinely am with them. Because I'm not allowed to have needs and I'm not allowed to be different. Definitely, absolutely transferred outside of my familial relationships and stuff. I also realized when I met people who weren't people pleasers, two things would happen. I would not like that person. Like, ugh, what kind of a person are they? They don't bend over backwards for other people. How inconsiderate these people are. Like, they're just not considerate. And then the other part was if there was an interaction I was witness to where somebody wasn't being a people pleaser in the sense that they were protecting themselves from somebody that was unkind, because that was another facet of it, was not only did I have to bend over backwards for other people, but I wasn't allowed to defend myself from other people. To see somebody place a boundary so that they could keep themselves safe, the first time I acknowledged somebody do that very cavalierly, they're just like, no, I'm not doing that. That would put me in an abusive position. I would be like, you're allowed to do that? What do you mean you're allowed to have boundaries? What?
People just saying no casually blew my mind.
You're saying no and you don't even have a week of anxiety to deal with about it?
Yeah, you don't have crippling panic and guilt. I 100% grew up around people pleasers, with people pleasers, learning that behavior. Like I said, codependency. Enmeshment is the highest form of codependency, where you try and become that person you are codependent with because your identity is so intertwined with them. So that was my experience. And then since I grew up in a religious house, especially under patriarchal teachings, it really was like women are meant to serve, women are meant to sacrifice, being taught that they are meant to be subservient, even to other women. The women who were outspoken and who did have some sort of respect in the community were still underneath their husbands or the men in positions of authority. I would say, honestly, my experiences with queer women and lesbians were very, very eye opening. I didn't know a ton of them, but every time there was some sort of interaction with someone who was gender nonconforming or could be identified as butch, that really got me, because it's just women standing on their own 2 feet, having to stand in their identity. Nobody's going to validate you. You just have to say, no, I have to protect myself first. And that was really fucking cool.
Because you were really pigeonholed into girlhood, and I was very much repelled from girlhood. I learned at a very young age, I was like, oh, I'm not going to gain any respect if I act feminine. By the time I was 5, I was refusing to wear dresses. I was refusing to wear pink. I was refusing to have my nails painted. I didn't want any part of it. And I would often make fun of the girly girls. But every once in a while, there'd be a girly girl I'd run into that had such a sense of power that I didn't have. She was just very in her own skin. Like, no, I like this because I like this. And I don't really care what the boys think. I don't care what the other girls think. I'm doing my own thing. It's because they had a feminist mom. But it really helped me accept the femininity within myself. I'm only hiding from this femininity because I'm afraid I will lose respect for it. Not because it's genuinely not a part of who I am. Thank you to the feminist girly girls that helped me acknowledge that through the years.
Shout out to girlhood.
I'm really grateful now that we're in this place within a society where like girlhood is so openly accepted. When millennials were growing up, and of course the generations before us, girls were pitted against each other, constantly pitted against each other, because we were made to believe there was some form of competition between us because everything was so male centered. Once you decenter this idea of society that girls should care about what males think of them, our whole world explodes into to beauty and wonder
Yeah.
and love and joy and has nothing to do with the competition that we were believed to think mattered.
Yeah. The whole "I'm not like other girls," that was a
Mhm.
rhetoric that I had very firmly planted in my
Mhm.
brain.
Me too. Yep.
And it just, I was alternative in a church full of normies.
Mhm.
And then obviously I had all the repressed identity stuff. So yeah, it's
Mhm.
just, and then yeah, that kind of leads to people pleasing behaviors because you want to be
Yeah.
accepted. You need to be accepted. And if you go outside of that little box that they put you in, saying, well, no, you're here for my use.
Yeah.
So you have to be my emotional support system and you don't
Right.
get to have emotions.
Right. And your identity has to align with how I identify you.
Yes. How I
Yeah.
identify as how like a parent identifies as a person, and then yes,
Mhm.
how you are supposed to be viewed, like
Exactly.
how are
Yeah. And
you are viewed by that parent.
right, right. And then that just completely distorts our idea of being perceived by everyone else in the world,
Yes.
because our parents, especially in households like us where it very much felt like there was always an eye watching because there
Mhm.
was some, like it was like everything was based out of fear. And and so to grow up and then know, oh, now that I'm grown, have to be perceived by the entire world, so to speak.
Mhm.
um I'm afraid that I'm being looked at through the same eyes that my
Oh my
parents
god.
have, you
Yeah.
know?
Mhm.
And that's terrifying to realize, to like to grow up in abuse and then realize, like, especially like my mom genuinely taught me, like, with her words, that people were trying to harm me. Like, she was like, the
Mhm.
world isn't going to be like the real world is a lot worse than your home life. Like, this, it's going to be so
Ugh.
much worse than this. Like, you need to buck up. Like, you need a thick skin. And then I
Yeah.
realized that she was literally the worst part. I've never met anybody more abusive than my mom and my brother. This realization, oh, I'm this people pleaser for terrible people, and
Mhm.
I've been conditioned to believe that everyone else in the world is like this. It's really damaging. And then when you realize that people aren't, I was just being abused, and actually most people are pretty nice.
That realization coming from a world where there was an in group and an out group, it was an us versus them. It's scary to go out in the world because you have God watching you at all times and you have your parents watching you at all times. And then you're just interacting with people who are chill and they're fine.
Yeah.
They're some of the nicest people you've ever met.
And while you're speaking to them, you feel like you're going to die because you're afraid they have all of these thoughts that they don't actually have about you.
They don't care or they think you're really cool. That was something I had to learn, that people thought I was really cool, not because I was in servitude to them or because I was a novelty. I
Just
wasn't.
somebody that they liked as a person.
Me as a person was just someone who people wanted around. It takes a while to find those people sometimes. Community college is a great way to interact and find people. Just going to be honest. If anybody's interested in college or community college, hit that up first because there's a
Yeah.
whole bunch of different people from a whole different bunch of walks of life, and you will find some of the coolest people and the most validating people there.
If you have a family member, especially a parent, who is actively trying to get you not to go to college, they are either trying to continue to isolate you or they are trying to continue furthering your conditioning. They are being harmful.
Especially if you come from like a religious family or a heavily indoctrinated family in any walk of life.
That's a hill I will die on. If you have a parent who's trying to prevent you from going to college, from doing anything that on paper would be really good for you, they are trying to prevent you from them not being in control. How did people pleasing as a child and being conditioned to people please within your family, how did that start to affect your relationships directly in your life?
Oh, God, so many ways. Getting praise from adults that wasn't really praise. I would
Mm,
do something or act a certain way and they would praise traits like being compassionate, soft-spoken, like really wanting to serve others, things like that. There was one time, I will never fucking forget this. It was a family friend. She was aware of the dynamic between my parents, my father especially, what he was like at home, kind of had a small idea. And she looked at me one time, I'm pretty sure I was about 15 years old, and she told me how amazing my compassion for my father was. And I went, okay, cool. Yeah, thanks. Then that reinforces that I'm doing something correct
Right.
because I'm being seen as compassionate and not
Right.
something negative. Because if
Yep.
I were to assert myself the ways that I even still was, if he'd scream in my face, I'd scream in his face. Not necessarily the healthiest behavior, but I'm also a teenager and shouldn't be subjected to that treatment. And so those things were seen as issues. Standing up for myself in that way were seen as issues. Standing up for my siblings or my mom was seen as an attitude, disrespectful, something to be punished, essentially something I should not be
Mhm.
doing.
Yeah.
And then to hear something like that, it was just a very strange validation of people pleasing tendencies and behaviors, to just be a doormat, to treat this person like they deserved my kindness, even though they were fucking awful. I think that's a pretty concrete example. There's obviously a ton of other things, daily life that happened, but I remember that specifically because I went, what the fuck? And I was 15.
What was a time where you realized that your people pleasing was destroying you?
My answer for that comes from my realization of no matter how much people pleasing I try to do, how much I try to conform to what I
Mhm.
thought other people wanted from me, I would never be good enough. It never really worked out. There was always a hollow part of me that didn't feel fulfilled or satisfied, always felt
Mm.
confused and abandoned. Probably those times that I would reach out and ask for help and be brushed off pretty much. Like my needs would
Yeah.
be ignored or denied. There were a couple times specifically I remember actively asking for mental health help and being pushed aside
Mm.
in my later teen years, where I really started to see that divide between me and the peers that I called friends. And then as I started becoming an adult, going to college, experiencing different people, experiencing life, becoming more independent, I realized how detrimental those codependent and enmeshed relationships were, and how that stopped
Yeah.
me from being a person.
What you said reminded me of being a teenager and like going to friends' houses and realizing that like they didn't get hit in the mouth if they said something wrong. It started to make me realize I'm doing all of my mom's emotional labor. In that moment, I realized I'm responsible for how my mom reacts to me, which is why she's manipulated me to react a certain way.
Ugh, that behavior is incredibly difficult to correct and work through, especially living at home.
Oh yeah, my cousin and I were on the phone the other day. Okay, so just to give you an idea, my cousins had a similar upbringing to my brother and I in the sense that their father is very much like my mother. They had similar upbringings, my mom and her brother, obviously, and it caused us, my cousins and I, to have similar upbringings. But we realized I am the youngest out of the four of us, between my two cousins,
Mhm.
my brother and I'm the first one who left home. Her and I were reflecting on it, and we realized that it was simply due to the fact that I was more self-aware. I was more self-aware that like what was going on wasn't right. I couldn't pinpoint what was wrong about it. I
Mhm.
just knew that I needed to not be in the house anymore. I knew I needed to
Yeah.
get the fuck out and live on my own. My oldest cousin, she was the last one to leave. She was the oldest. She was almost 30. Now that she is 42, she's very much like spent the last several years realizing, oh my God, I was so deeply enmeshed with my parents. My
Mhm.
parents are not really that great of people. I was being abused and I didn't fully acknowledge it. And I have to completely undo everything I did, you know?
Jeez. Yeah.
And then her sister and my brother are still very much enmeshed with the
Mm.
family. We just thought it was so interesting, this domino effect of, okay, I left first because I had higher self-awareness. My cousin left next. She had higher self-awareness. And then my brother and my other cousin, they are still very enmeshed with the family and have not done any real work on their mental health, their conditioning, and all that stuff.
I relate to being the first person to move away from home. My oldest sisters moved out, would still come back to my parents' house quite often. They still do that. My youngest sister, even though she would
Mhm.
spend time with friends and things like that, like she still lives with my parents. There's a range of moving out and living independently and being independent. I'm the one that has completely not a part of that unit anymore per se. I don't visit them very often. I have limited contact with them, on purpose. I relate to being the child to make that separation and no longer feel like I am being watched. One of the big reasons why I wanted to move across the country was so that I could get out from that, where I could stop feeling like everything I was doing was being observed. And I think about moving back now, wanting that fantasy family. And I think about that and I go, oh, it's got to be 8+ hour drive. I'm not sorry, because I have a boundary in place, and it's a physical one. It's a physical boundary. We have to have relationship boundaries, especially with familial relationships, which are
Yeah.
difficult. A lot of relationships aren't black and white, especially with enmeshment and codependency. It's difficult to find the
Right. Yeah.
nuances in a relationship and the boundaries that you need to set to protect yourself while also wanting to preserve that relationship. That comes from deconstructing that relationship with the understanding of it not being what you thought it probably might have been. That can also
Yeah.
make it easier to create boundaries, especially when we want to stick with our family, stay in that family orbit. The nuclear family
Right.
is
Right.
what everyone strives for. Siblings are going to be your best friends for life. You always are going to need your mother's love. It can honestly just create a much more stressful environment and a further breakdown of boundaries, especially if it's in a household that is not healthy.
There's definitely degrees in
Oh,
which
yeah.
like people can maintain their relationships with their family, and I think you and I have a good range of degrees. Whereas like
Hmm.
you are able to maintain a relationship with your mom, you're not really able to maintain a relationship with your dad.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
able to maintain a relationship with my dad. I'm not able to maintain a relationship with my mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're very different in the way that they work. It's interesting looking at the parallels and differences and how we both have relationships along all ends of the spectrum for
Hmm.
this. Whereas your mom loves you. She wants you to
Yeah.
know that you love her, even though she cannot always properly show that to you. It seems very much like she's making the effort. She's like, regardless of
It's
who you
there.
are, yeah. She's like,
Yeah.
regardless of who you show me, I'm going to try my best to love you in the ways that I can. Whereas your dad, that ship has sailed, and you're like, fuck that guy.
He sends me sweet cards, a couple checks a year. Will write
Yeah.
me a little letter and go, "Oh, I miss you so much." It's very confusing.
In his mind, that's how he can maintain the relationship. Doing these rhetorical things where he doesn't have to show parenthood in any way. And I like how you respond to it, where it's just very much, yeah, I don't give a fuck.
I consider it reparations. Like I don't know what to do with you. It's a weird time getting here.
I was so enmeshed with my mom at one point, and
Hmm.
now we haven't spoken in 2 years. When you get yourself out of the cycle of an abusive relationship, regardless of who that is, and then you find yourself in a place you wish you could depend on that person, but in that
Hmm.
same moment, you're like, oh, I couldn't have depended on them anyway. What am I talking about? This is already so much better. Even if I hit rock bottom, my life is better than when they were in it.
It's that fantasy relationship that you have. It's always
Mhm.
what you wish it was, which is something that I have had to contend with. Not reaching out, not trying to have a relationship with him anymore. There's that, oh, well, he's still alive. There's still the potential. At this
Mhm.
point in my life, I am beyond that. I know
Right.
that there's no potential for a relationship there. He
Yep.
cannot be who I needed him to be. And even if he tried now, it would be so insincere to me. It's too late.
Yeah, exactly. All the times that I've had somebody tell me, you really should speak to your mom, you really should have a relationship with her. The people who have told me that, I am convinced are people who wish they could have told their mom to fuck off.
I was never born out of love.
Unfortunately, now myself, my brother exist, and 5 more children exist because my brother was born. When is it going to stop? People pleasing is overtly more of a problem that women struggle with, specifically because we are taught we are not allowed to have needs. Men manipulate their emotional needs into physical needs so that it seems justifiable. So, while I do say, of course, men deal with people pleasing tendencies, Women overtly have to deal with it much, much more because of the way that we are conditioned not to have needs. By the way, this is definitely a misogynistic issue too.
And then you go, okay, well, what is a boundary and how do you actually create one, enact it, and keep it? Well, the American Psychological Association defines a boundary, a psychological demarcation that protects the integrity of an individual or group, that helps the person or group set realistic limits on participation in a relationship or activity. So saying, I don't want to do this, I do want to do this, it's healthy for you, not healthy for you, or you just don't want to. It's not, oh, I never want to do this, I always want to do this. It's very simple. I don't want to eat the food that you're serving today because I don't want to.
Dude, that is such a good point. Acknowledging the boundaries that we place, we can
Mhm.
move. Something that I dealt with, the idea that once we do start to learn that we can set boundaries, that we also have to uphold those specific boundaries till the end of time. No, you
Yeah.
can change your boundaries.
Mhm.
Your boundaries should be based on how you are feeling in the moment. They aren't
Mhm.
like, okay, this is my new boundary and everybody has to operate off of that, even me, for the rest of eternity. If you don't want to hug your grandpa today, but the next time you visit him, you feel comfortable enough to hug your grandpa, you're allowed to ask your grandpa for a hug. You can't just be like, oh,
Yeah.
well, I didn't hug him last time and now I'm never allowed to hug my grandpa again. Some people's brains work like that, and mine is one of them. Acknowledging that once you have the ability to place boundaries, it's not like you're building a rigid structure that has to exist to the end of time. Boundaries are something that can move around.
The boundary for that example could be, hey, grandpa, I do like hugs, but I am going to ask you to wait until I ask for that hug. Or you can request a hug and you must respect my answer of yes or no.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's a concrete thing to say to somebody, and it
Yeah.
might feel weird at first, especially if you grew up in a family or around people where hugging was just normal. You were supposed to do it, and if you refused a hug, you were made to hug anyway.
Having something that you say that's like, hey, let me be the one to initiate.
Yeah.
There's something that my cousin Ashley that I mentioned earlier, something that she
Mhm.
does. She has she has 4 kids, and 2 of them are on the autism spectrum.
Mhm.
And one of them is, oh gosh, she 12? I don't even know how old she is anymore. Maybe she's 10 or 11. But she has the mental capacity of like a 6 or 7 year old.
Mhm.
So sometimes the things that she can explain to the other child, she cannot explain in the same way to her older child. And
Mhm.
so to the older child, her therapist gave her the recommendation that was like, hey, why don't you give your daughter 3 words? Like 3 word sentences that she can use to set boundaries for people, because
Oh.
it's hard for her to set boundaries with friends at school or like
Mhm.
a stranger at the park or whatever it is, because she doesn't know how to articulate it in the best way
Mhm.
because she's a little further behind. So
Yeah.
her therapist was like, 3 words that tells, that she can use that helps her set boundaries, or 3 words
Mhm.
that you give her so that you can set a boundary with her. And it has helped them so much. And
Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
that is actually really good to use with pretty much anybody, to just
Mhm.
make it as simple as possible in that circumstance. Hey, I have to go see family. I know that they're going to want a hug. And, you have a family member that comes up, is immediately coming in for a hug. And you can just kind of like,
I don't want to right now.
yeah, exactly. I don't want to right now.
Boundaries are all about consent.
And if the other person has a problem with it, it's not your problem.
If someone gets upset that they can't feel your body, that's their problem. You could still be just as close with someone and never hug them, especially for people who have sensory issues. Touch can be a
Hmm.
lot. And if
Oh, yeah.
someone needs to put their hands on you, that
That's
is
weird.
strange. And that also speaks to them probably never having autonomy over their body as well.
That's the biggest thing I have noticed is when you place boundaries with somebody and they get upset, it's oftentimes because they didn't place that boundary themselves and
Hmm.
they feel like, well, I had to do it, so should you. That's simply not the case. If you are in a family who is very huggy and does make it a big deal if you don't hug, again, it is their problem to deal with. If you are one of those people, do what you can to uphold your boundaries while still being a peacekeeper. You can always buddy up with your cousin or somebody who does like to hug. And you're like, I'm not hugging today, so everybody gets an extra hug from Sally. So Sally gets all my hugs today.
I know some people just need that physical contact when they say hello. So a fist bump, a
Mm-hmm.
handshake, a high five. You can create boundaries with a middle ground as long as you are not uncomfortable in the compromise.
No compromise should mean that you're compromising on your comfort or safety.
Meaning boundaries are not selfish. There is nothing selfish about protecting yourself and putting yourself first. You are the only you that you get. I like to think of boundaries as the fence with which we protect our health and well-being. It's the little fence around your yard, around your house. You can let people in. You can also keep people out. But it's for you to be able to do what you need for yourself. It's not a skill many people are taught. Creating boundaries should start in childhood, but if you have a enmeshed relationship with your parent, that's going to be non-existent. Unfortunately, passive aggression, avoidance, and punishment without clear cause are utilized to keep children on their best behavior. So, not letting children have needs, speaking up for ourselves, and voicing our needs are foundational for building strong boundaries. Those are things that potentially got you punished when you were a kid. They don't have to get you punished now, especially if you're an adult. There's no reason that you saying no should result in punishment. In my experience, it's better to face rejection than become resentful of someone you care about. If you are never telling them, I don't want that hug, and you are constantly letting them have that physical contact with you and you hate it, you are going to be resentful of seeing that person and not be able to have a meaningful relationship with them. And they might be totally cool and go, oh, okay, I'm sorry. I want to know you and I want to have this relationship with you. And if that's what you need for us to stay connected, that's fine. Whoever does not respond well to any healthy boundary does not value the person setting the boundary. If people are constantly pushing back on your boundaries, they don't care about you. They care about what you give them.
The other part of this is if there is somebody who gives you a hard time about placing boundaries and it in turn makes you feel guilty, you feel like you can't uphold those boundaries now, you need to just push through that guilt. That is how we abandon ourselves time and time again. When we try to set boundaries, we feel this guilt that we're not giving ourselves to others and it makes us fold. Delos, he's pushing my mic around. Don't let that guilt cause you to move that boundary to a place of discomfort.
Because your boundaries do come with responsibilities. We can't assume others will uphold them without our enforcement. We have to be the one to put our foot down. If you grew up in a family who constantly violated inherent boundaries like bodily autonomy, they expect you to continue being a doormat. We have to decide for ourselves what boundaries will protect us, and we do have to be the person to say, you crossed this line. You can't ask people to read your mind. If you don't want them to do something, if you're not okay with something, if you have tasks and chores you're splitting up and they aren't upholding their end of the bargain and they're crossing into taking advantage of you, and that's a line that you've drawn in the sand that they are not allowed to cross, you have to say something about it. The book that I really pulled from for this episode is called The Book of Boundaries, Set the Limits That Will Set You Free by Melissa Urban. And I really like it because it is very clear and concise. And she also has scripts available. Obviously, you have to be safe. This is not for if you're in an abusive relationship.
If you're in an abusive relationship where you know your safety could be in danger, you people please until you disappear, until you can get the fuck out of.
Get that plan together and you do not even give them a fucking second to think that you might be leaving, and you get the fuck out of there. You pack a backpack and you go.
Disclaimer, all these rules are different if you're actively in an abusive relationship.
Someone who's just a little bit overbearing and who has never had to worry about somebody else in their life asserting their needs is different than someone who actively is a danger to you. Would you like to go into your recommended practices when learning and actually setting boundaries? Because we talked a lot about what they are. How do we do that? How do we make them?
This list is an amalgamation from a bunch of different websites and psychological articles around placing boundaries. When you are learning to set boundaries, the first thing is obviously identifying your limits, identifying what you need to have boundaries around, and acknowledging what people are likely to cross over those boundaries. It is up to you to communicate those boundaries, those limits very clearly to people. It is also up to you to set consequences. You're at a family gathering or whatever, and you're telling somebody, we've had this issue before where I don't feel comfortable in these conversations. If you bring this topic up, I'm going to remove myself and leave. And that is a consequence. If you bring up this topic, I'm not speaking to you anymore at this moment, and then being consistent. Let's say they bring up the topic that you don't want to talk about. You cannot just people please and sit there through the conversation, sit through your discomfort. You must be like, okay, that was my cue to leave. And you have to be consistent and maintain those boundaries for yourself. Use the sacred pause. The sacred pause is something that all millennials do. It's quite literally where you have a moment, you pause before reacting to something so that A, you don't use the initial built-in reaction that you've done as a people pleaser time and time again. Secondarily, if somebody did say something to you really off color, the sacred pause gives them a moment to reflect on what they just said. They're replaying that in their head. So using the sacred pause in those moments can be really beneficial. And then accept and move through the guilt that you have for choosing yourself. Like I mentioned earlier, where you have these boundaries in place, it can upset people. It probably will upset people, and guilt will follow along with that. You must move through that guilt and acknowledge the only reason that you are feeling that guilt is because you are diverting from the neural pathway you have used time and time again in those circumstances. It feels like you're doing something wrong to that person. It feels like you're doing something wrong to yourself. You must just move through that discomfort. Lastly, protect your time, energy, and your privacy. All of the things that you had placed boundaries around, you must protect those things and protect your energy you give to others. So I'm sure Teddy has tons to expand off of these.
I do have a bit to expand upon. I would also like to note you can have boundaries around the same type of thing. You can have boundaries around physical touch for everybody in your life. Each specific boundary for different groups of people can look different. It does not have to be a blanket. I don't want hugs from everybody. It can be I don't like having physical contact with people I only associate as acquaintances, and I have 2 or 3 close friends that don't even have to ask. You can protect yourself in different areas of your life, but it doesn't have to be a blanket boundary if you don't want it to be.
One of my experiences that made me realize that I didn't have proper boundaries with people is I tried to place a boundary with people that I thought I was allowed to place boundaries with. I was at a party with friends. I was 17. So I was at this party and I am introduced to some new people. There's this guy that I was introduced to who was the brother of somebody that I knew. Because I knew his sister, he acted really friendly and like tried to give me a hug. And I was like, oh, I'm not a hugger. Like, I'll give you a handshake. He got really offended. He like recoiled. And by the way, he's like 6'4" and I'm 5'4" and was irritated. And then the sister, the friend that I knew, got up in my face and was like, you're not going to hug my fucking brother? What's wrong with you? What do you think? He's got fucking germs or something? Like, how rude. And then the entire party, all of the people that were standing around us in this house party turned to me and they were watching this interaction and they all joined in and they're like, yeah, what the fuck's wrong with you? What are you, racist or something? What are you, sexist or something? No, I simply just don't like to hug strangers. I'm allowed to have that boundary. And I suddenly had this realization in this moment, I was being treated the way that I was treated at home. Realizing that, being like, no, fuck you. I'm not allowed to have boundaries at home. So you fucking damn well better believe I'll have boundaries here. And I left. And I remember reflecting on that for years after that happened and being like, I was allowed to have boundaries at home too. It wasn't just because I was in a public setting that I was allowed to have boundaries. I should have been allowed to have those boundaries from the start. So when you start to place boundaries with people, it starts to reveal the people you don't have boundaries with.
When I set boundaries and the way I've learned to identify when I need to create a boundary or how to do that specifically, it's helpful to discover the underlying need for the boundary. Resentment is building in a relationship. You have no time for yourself. Maybe you're always volunteering, you're always self-sacrificing, or you simply don't want to spend time with certain people. You're sacrificing your energy, so you have to find why the boundary needs to be enacted. Sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes it's just, I don't want this thing to happen. I don't want to be in this situation. And that's fine. You don't have to go into the nitty gritty of everything. If there's a specific situation that continues happening, maybe look a little bit deeper into why exactly you're uncomfortable and you need to create that space around yourself. You have to outline the specific boundary using specific language, what your needs are, and how this reclaiming of those needs and your time will benefit you. You don't always have to tell the other person that you're setting the boundary with all of these details. You can just give them a clear, concise, actionable step that needs to happen or needs to not happen depending on the situation. But for yourself, sometimes it's helpful to outline the very specific boundary so you know why you are doing this, and it's a lot easier to not break it yourself and just do what the other person wants. You can create scripts, especially with people who are neurodivergent. I know I have to write down what I want to say oftentimes when it comes to something serious. Specific language is very important. I would say don't include include any caveats by which the other party can cross this line. No maybes, no sometime. If it's a type of hugging situation, you can be clear and say, I will initiate, or please ask to initiate. There is the inherent underlying, sometimes, maybe, possibly. Don't say that, because then people will throw that back to you. Say, well, you said maybe, you said later, even if they're adults.
On occasion where it's completely consensual or on my terms.
So you have to set and hold consequences. If you bring up this certain subject, I'm just going to leave. You don't have to tell someone that you're leaving because they brought this up. You just leave.
You already said it. You already set the expectation.
If you try to hug me without asking or without me initiating, then I will no longer allow you that type of affection. And then stick to it. And if down the line, if things change, things can change. If people think that you're wishy-washy because you decide you want to hug somebody one day and you don't the next day, that's their problem.
You are never responsible for how other people are perceiving you. That is
Nope.
not your job.
Make the consequences beneficial to you, but not with the intention of hurting the other party. A boundary isn't spiteful. It isn't supposed to be petty. It's saying, I need to protect myself. I am putting myself first. I am voicing that I have needs. And so any boundary that is beneficial to you, I know we keep bringing up the hug example, but I think it's a really good one because a lot of people don't have bodily autonomy, especially if you're raised female, socialized as a woman. If you feel uncomfortable, it benefits you to not hug them, because hugging you when you are not wanting that affection only gives them satisfaction. Boundaries are for your protection. How other people feel about them is not your concern. It's for you. If you don't want something to happen, if you don't want to go to a certain place, if you don't want to have a certain type of food in your house, if you don't want people to keep their shoes on in your house, that is your boundary. That is for you to ask. And if somebody has a problem with you not wanting them to track mud and snow and dirt into your house, then they don't even have to be in your sphere, because what is that?
If they are not going to respect your boundaries, they're not going to respect you or your home.
They don't care about you at all. And that really sucks, and it really hurts to hear, and it can hurt to say to somebody. But if you need to hear this,
and while it does suck, it also can be really liberating. Once you realize the people that you need to set boundaries with that are continually trying to manipulate you or continually trying to get more out of you or get you to self-sabotage for their own benefit, those people aren't people that you should have in your life anyway. So once you realize that you don't have that relationship with them, you're not going to be able to have the relationship that you want with them, then it is a blessing in disguise.
Then you're not sitting there constantly thinking about what they think of you, what they want from you, how do you please them, which is, again, it just circles back around to people pleasing behavior and understanding where maybe your codependency stems from. Because you don't have to be dependent on anybody for your self-worth or for your validation for who you are. You're an individual. We want community, and humans are relational beings, but you are an individual.
Our worth, our value is inherent. No one has to acknowledge it for it to be there. And I know that that's hard for us. We have to acknowledge our worth ourselves a lot of the time. When you acknowledge your own worth, you will attract the people who see your worth.
Yes. Because they see you walking in that. And they love it.
Yeah.
They love it.
We didn't exactly mention it before, but being a people pleaser is something that happens to a lot of people as a result of narcissistic abuse. So a lot of people who have parents who are often narcissists will grow up to be people pleasers. So it's important that you acknowledge what narcissistic abuse looks like in case you are a victim to it. And it might help you acknowledge things and learn to place boundaries with those people. There is one more thing from my personal experience that really helped me work through understanding the boundaries that I needed to place with people. Having times of isolation in my life where I withdraw and I'm like, okay, I need to not be in a place where people are testing my boundaries for me to acknowledge where those boundaries need to be. You know, having like a couple months here and there in my life, especially after difficult points, after a breakup or during something traumatic, having some isolation time where I'm like, what makes me feel safe? Acknowledging what makes me feel safe, and then acknowledging what boundaries I might need to place with certain people, and then re-entering my social life and being like, now I'm in a test zone where I'm testing out the boundaries that I can place with people, like testing out how I feel when I place these boundaries with people or how they respond to it, so that I can acknowledge who I can and can't have in my life or who will and won't accept me with these boundaries. That was really helpful to me. Having a pet has helped me not necessarily place boundaries, but acknowledge that the boundaries that other living things have, not just humans. I grew up with a family who treated animals like they weren't living things. Just growing up and acknowledging like this is a whole autonomous being. It's not just
Mhm.
a pet there for your emotional well-being. Like this is a creature
Yeah.
that deserves to have their own boundaries. And I know that sounds crazy, but there really are people who don't acknowledge that. They're like, no, it's just
No,
a
it's not
dog. No, it's
crazy.
just a cat. It's like, no, it's a
Yeah.
whole living creature that's allowed to walk away from you.
Not there to serve you. If you have a pet in your home, it's because hopefully
It's
you
a
want its
member of your
company
family
and
that
you
you
want to take
love.
care of
Yeah.
it.
So I know it sounds silly. Not just humans have boundaries. All living things are allowed to have
Mhm.
boundaries.
Thank you for bringing that up. That is something that I had to learn, especially with having a dog. Both my boundaries and her boundaries. You know, like you have to learn how to read her body language. You have to learn what
Yeah.
her different little grunts and groans mean. And then also, I have to be able to say, okay, I love this cute little creature and she loves me and she really wants to spend time with me. But right now, I am overwhelmed and over fucking stimulated. So, all I'm going to do, I'm not going to do anything mean. I'm not going to be harsh. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close my bedroom door and my bathroom door so that I can take a shower and get
Yeah,
dressed and
exactly.
spend like 45 minutes by myself. She's just gonna go
Right.
lay down and chill and drink some water the
Exactly.
same way that she would if the door was open. But it's not hurting her. Yeah, I can't be like, hey, Soul, I'm just gonna like take this little shower. I'm like, listen, girl, if I don't close these doors right now and separate myself right now, I'm gonna lose it.
And now that you say that, I can look back and kind of see that progression in your relationship with Hazel, because I remember
Aw.
when I would come over to visit, you would fuss over Hazel a lot, like what she was doing. There were times where I'm like, if you don't keep engaging with her and fussing over her, then she'll just go lay down. And then now I see very much that you're like, okay, baby, I need a moment. I need a moment, you know? And it's so I've even seen that progress. And so I'm happy to hear that you've acknowledged that and you're like, no, we're both allowed to have boundaries here.
Definitely took a lot of time, a lot of therapy, medication. A lot of it was just me recognizing, she's not a human being, but she still has a brain and she's still smart and she knows when I'm angry and I'm upset.
Hmm.
And so I would rather separate myself from that situation and calm myself down so that she isn't scared.
She's not absorbing that.
Yeah, she's not absorbing that. And she knows that if I close the door and I am ignoring her for a little bit, then I'm not mad at her. Whereas if I was just, being like, get out, like if she was trying to come in and see what's going on and all that kind of stuff, it would be so much less productive and she would actually be scared. And that's
Yeah.
not what I want.
Yeah, absolutely. I made that same realization with Delos when I was younger, because when he was younger, we were both younger. When he was a kitten, because I would get frustrated with him and I would yell at him to go away
Yeah.
and stuff, like if he was doing something he wasn't supposed to, scratching the couch or whatever. And
Mhm.
I was yelling at him the same way my mom would yell at me as a child, and it was
Mhm.
so triggering for me. And I actually had a partner, an old boyfriend, point it out and be like, you yell at your cat a lot. And
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh my god. Oh my god, I do." And so like I really paid attention from that point on, and I was like, "Oh my god, I am yelling at my cat the way my mom would discipline me as a child, and that is
Mhm.
not okay." And
No.
from that point on, I was very conscious and like was able to reduce that anger response and reduce it further
Mhm.
and further and further, and was able to even make it better outside of my relationship with my cat. And we were not bonded when I was living in apartments, and I was like, that's how I was reacting to him doing something bad. We were not bonded. We were not a bonded relationship. And now that there have been many years where I have undone that and I have like allowed him to, to be the little gremlin that he is, while not
Aw.
letting him absorb all of my anger and stuff, and also acknowledging that like I wasn't angry in those moments. It's just I was taught to discipline with that tone of voice.
Yeah, you're having a response.
Yeah, and I didn't want to. So after undoing all those things, we are bonded now, and I can tell he trusts me more than any other
Yeah.
being. Like he truly trusts me with his life, and I really don't think that we would have been able to get there had I still kept disciplining him with that angry tone.
I agree with that because I see that with Hazel as well. There was a very specific turning point where I had been in therapy for quite some time. There was a point where I was at home. I was so over it. I was having such a stressful day, and I was trying to eat my dinner, and she was trying to, and she was like, I gotta go out. I was just looking at her, and I was like, baby, I am so sorry. I have to eat this right now. We're gonna go out as soon as possible. I promise. I didn't have it in me to be angry. Girl, I love you. You have got to give me a minute. And then we went on that walk. I wasn't feeling hot. I started talking to her. Hazel, honey, we got to hurry up. I'm feeling
Hmm.
nauseous. Like, we just got to get back to the house. It was a peaceful walk. I wasn't trying to get her to hurry up or anything. I was just like, dude, we gotta get home. So we get home, and then I think it was that night we were laying in bed, and she hadn't cuddled with me a lot, especially after my spouse left, because I was not in a good place. And so she didn't feel safe. And then finally that day, I was going to bed, and she came up on the bed and
Hmm.
she laid her head on my stomach and everything. And that was the first time she had done that in a long time. I told my therapist about this, and she was like, well, it sounds like she was just kind of waiting for you to chill out, like waiting for you to calm down. And that's how it felt. There are moments where she is genuinely being hard headed. Okay. She is a brat. She is 9 years old. She is an old lady. She is grumpy. She is harumphy. She wants, okay? She yearns. She yearns for the cheese. Reparenting ourselves through having pets is fun because then we learn how to not give in to them, their every whim and desire, recognize their boundaries, recognize our boundaries, and how even though we
Yeah.
can't communicate in English, how those things need to go. Ooh, sorry, I don't know if you heard that. I
What the
just popped.
fuck was that?
That was my neck.
Good God.
I finally got it to pop. Sorry.
That was loud as shit. You just snapped your femur.
I promise I'm not doing that. It's all gonna stay inside the sausage casing of my body. Hopefully.
Oh my God, funny thing. So I remember learning about fascia years ago in the body and being like,
Uh-huh.
huh, I must have learned about this in school because the word fascia sounds really familiar. Did you
Mhm.
know it's also a construction term? And that's where I heard it first.
Oh, really?
Yes, it is a term for building construction. And because a fascia is literally a piece of the wall, that's where I've heard that term before. Isn't that funny?
Amazing.
Anyway, that was our episode on people pleasing and boundaries. Thank you all for tuning in.
That's it. That's all I got. I'm looking forward to some shrimp fried rice after this.
And my blessing is may your boundaries serve you well.
May your boundaries serve you well and may they make you stronger.
Lovely.
Catch you next week then.